Wonderful. What I plan to do is, as before, do the first section where I introduce his practices. If you see anything in or hear anything in the presentation at that point, please wave a hand. I'm also really honored, thank you, that we have three fluent Japanese speakers and readers. So if you see any mistakes, correct, because you know and I don't. So that's wonderful. And I actually have a couple of questions connected with Japanese language along the way. I'll begin as always with giving you his face because it's always nice. Oh, sorry, I know how to name. How do I call you? Is it Brother Brito or Errol? How do I call you? Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, unmute.
Sorry,
Could you?
I am Brother Brito.
Bro Brito.
Brother Brito.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to give us, because I don't think you've seen any of the earlier talks, it's quite handy to begin this way. So Imaoka Shinichiro was born in 1881, and let's get rid of that. So born in 1881 and born in 1988, died in 1988. He was a Japanese educator, a principal of an important school in Tokyo, the Seisoku Academy. He was a Unitarian, a Japanese Unitarian, different from other kinds, and an advocate of free religion. And he played a very important role in the life of the IARF, the International Association for Religious Freedom, between 1948 and 1949, and when he died, aged amazingly 106. So you have a picture of him in your mind. I will share just some pictures with you. This, of course, is Imaoka with, I hope I get the pronunciation correct, Nikio Niwano, who was the important founder of Rishiko Sekai and also a president of the IARF. So that's him in his later years. This is Imaoka Sensei at his desk in 1985 when he was 104 years old. There's the beautiful flowers. I'll just note that, and flowers in the corner. I'm going to come back to that. Going back in his life, here is a picture of him in front of his wife's company in 1965. He's in his 80s. He's about 80 at this point. This was an imperial award. And then going back even further to 1930, this was when he was just 50, really, nearly 50, as a young man. So there's Imaoka for you, Imaoka Sensei. Now, he once wrote that he thought the task of free religion was to help ossified simply means turned to stone. So turned to stone, formalized, established religions return to their original sources and to revive them with free and creative life. In other words, to transform, as he said, Christianity and Buddhism into free Christianity and free Buddhism. So he always hoped that. I should add that it's clear from his other writings, as we've been hearing in our early conversation, that this list is much bigger than simply Christianity and Buddhism. It was expanded to free Shinto, free Islam, free Judaism, free Hinduism. He was concerned with freedom in all those traditions. But then Imaoka Sensei immediately said, quote, however, if free Christianity and free Buddhism, free Shinto, free etc., are fully to embody freedom, true freedom, then there is no need to cling to traditional labels such as Christianity or Buddhism. No need. You can still use the labels, but you don't have to do this. And he carries on and says, it would be sufficient simply to call it free religion, Jiyu Shukyo. So in his post-1948 free religious community, the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, he tried to create a living expression of this free religion without traditional labels. Did he succeed or did he not? That's another question, but he tried, and it's a wonderful experiment. And the central task within this community was, he said, for its members to engage in the collaborative work, working together, of mutual refinement of character. So he was trying to help people become better human beings. In other words, although in Imaoka Sensei's heart and mind, free religion was something that could help liberate an individual person to develop their own honest and truthful spirituality, he never lost sight of the fact that an individual person can only properly do this collaboratively in community and over the course of a lifetime. And we'll see this idea come up again when later on in this introductory talk. Anyway, although Imaoka Sensei never explicitly wrote about it this way, it seems to me that there must be in play two often overlapping kinds of free religious practices. The first kind of free religious practices are those any individual, any one of us, freely develops and adopts as meaningful and helpful for themselves. So in other words, these are the things we might do ourselves privately, perhaps, for example, in the morning or the evening or in some other setting, the things we individually find valuable. The second kind of free religious practices are those that are designed to be done together, publicly, in a free religious community. And in Imaoka Sensei's case, this was the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai. So in this talk, I'm just going to begin with some of the explicit practices associated with Kietsu Kyokai. That's where I'll begin. And they often overlap with the private, implicit practices that we catch sight of because of the wonderful essays that we now have access to, that some of us have got copies of. But to begin, I think it's important to remind everybody what kind of free religious community Imaoka Sensei thought the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai was. Now, this is why I'm really, really pleased to have Japanese speakers here. Thank you. As all of you will know, I'll share some characters in a second. Kiitsu means returning to one, and Kyokai means church or congregation, but I'm going to come back to Kiitsu later. This is mostly about Kyokai. So let me share this for you. Here we are. Okay. Please jump in, Japanese friends from Japan, if I get something wrong or you want to add something here. So the first two characters in every case, in each of those three, are Kiitsu, returning to one. And the very top set of characters, so these ones here, Kiitsu Kyokai, this was his 1920, this was the organization he was involved with in the 1910, 11, 12, 13, with Anasaki Masaharu. And this was a secular, a sort of non-religious interfaith cultural exchange. And again, let's hope I've got this right. This kind of kyokai is the same kyokai that's used in the Japanese television service, NHK. Is that right? Yeah. It's not specifically a religious organization. So the first Kiitsu Kyokai he was involved with had this. But after 1948, he changed this. He actually changed it to the bottom one, but I'm going to come back to this. And you will find in the book, if you ever do get Imaoka Sensei's book, This is how Kietsu Kyokai is written. And as most of you know, means a sort of teaching, and a kai is the sort of association of building. And this is the move from a secular kyo to a more religious kyo. So it's definitely a returning to one kyokai, a religious community. But the trouble is, again, as many of you here will know, that this kyokai generally means a Christian church, but not always. So when I was talking to Miki Nakura, my another Dharma friend from Otaniha Jodo Shinshu, and also my teacher of my Seiza teacher, and indeed Vince's Seiza teacher, that there is, for example, in Tokyo, a Jodo Shinshu Otaniha temple called Kangi Kyokai, the Church of Joy. So there's a Jodo Shinshu temple that uses Kyokai like this second one. But generally it's a Christian church, yeah. So on his notice board, and let me move to his notice board, there you can see at the end, there's Tokyo, of course, and there's Ki-Itsu, and here's the Kyokai. He's using an old character for Kyokai. And in my researches and through talking to George and George talking to Imaoka Sensei, what he wanted to do with this, he's trying to draw apparently on a Confucian idea where that Kai, that older character, has the context of communal learning and ethical cultivation that would exist in older Confucian settings. So he used Kyokai using these third sets of characters. Sorry, let's get back to this one. He used this last Kyokai to let people who could read it see that it was a religious organization, but it wasn't a Christian church. It wasn't quite this Kyokai, it was this Kyokai. It's a really subtle point that I think can get lost. And later on, or if you want to say now, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. So the point about sharing that in terms of practices is to remember that the Kiitsu Kyokai for Imaoka Sensei wasn't simply a church or a temple. It was also a place of learning. It was a learning and the idea of mutual exchange of ideas. So there's this Confucian idea mixed in with the whole picture. Could people read that? I'd love to know. Would many Japanese readers be able to see that nuance? I don't know, but it was a subtle nuance that was lost when the book was printed by the modern authors, because they went back to using Kyokai, the middle one that sort of mostly means church. Okay. So that's the context in which all these practices are happening. It's religious, it's spiritual, but it's also a place of learning, mutual learning and exchange of ideas. Okay, so explicit practices. Excuse me. The first one I think we need to consider, of course, is the form of quiet sitting meditation, Seiza, that he learnt directly from its founding figure, Okada Torajiro, who was born in 1872 and died in 1920. Imaoka Sensei continued to practice Seiza for an hour each day, probably 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the evening. That's the standard way of doing it. And in 1979, aged 98, again, all these quotes come from the book. So if you have it, I can give you the references. So there's George. Excellent. He's joined us. We have begun, of course, but lovely to have you, George. I've just started to talk about, I've introduced the idea of Kiitsu Kyokai, and now we're just starting the first explicit practice, Seiza meditation. So in 1979, aged 98, he went so far as to say that Caesar had, quote, become the culmination of my spiritual search. It was his spiritual practice, his basic spiritual practice. And now, before I continue, I think it's helpful to show you a couple of pictures to introduce you to just exactly what Caesar was. Many of you will know, but a couple of you won't. So let's just make sure we know what we're talking about. Here we go. So here is a picture, courtesy of George's filming. This is Imaoka Sensei on the right and a member of Kietsu Kyokai on the left. And there they are sitting in classic Caesar position, as sort of the basic Japanese way of sitting. So that's a picture of him. Here is a very famous picture from the literature. This is Yanagida Saijiro. He was a very important Japanese businessman. Again, some of you may know the name. And I love this picture because look at that's such a beautiful triangle of sitting. He's just so centered, just so centered. So it's often done seated, but there's been some interesting translation work done, and I'll just get you a picture of how I do it because I can't sit. I haven't got that flexibility. As you know, most people in the West don't sit like that, so my knees won't do it. But Okada Sensei was always very clear that you could do Seiza anywhere, and so you could also sit. So this is a sit on a chair. So and it's a practice of sitting that once you adopt the posture, it's a belly breathing. You breathe into the lower belly, the tanden, and slowly, slowly, slowly breathe out. You breathe out very slowly until about 80% of your breath is finished, and then the in-breath comes completely naturally. And that's what you're concentrating on, getting out of the head down into the tanden, the belly. And that's almost it. There are important ways to sit properly and drop your solar plexus. And if any of you are ever interested, my Dharma friend Miki Nakura and we did translate one of the instruction books by Kobayashi Nobuku, who knew who knew Okada Sensei, and that's got a set of instructions about how to do it. But it's a very, very straightforward way of sitting. So Miki Nakura, by the way, Miki Nakura Sensei does an online session twice a week in Zoom. So if you want to join it, as I say, he's a Jodo Shinshu Otani-ha minister. But if you ever want to join, just ask and I'll send you the link. He's a very nice man. I think you'd all enjoy him. And he has offered, if the IARF ever wants to have a session on Caesar, he'd teach it for us. So have a think about that. So now you know how to the basic sitting. This is Imaoka Sensei writing about it in 1975 after a period of illness. Quote, "Some ask if I get bored since I've withdrawn from all public duties and spend all day confined to my house. But I'm never bored. Every day I practice Okada-style Seiza for at least 1 hour. There's no Buddhist altar or Shinto shrine in my house. Furthermore, unlike when I was a Christian, I don't read the Bible or pray daily. However, I can't give up Seiza. Seiza is simply sitting in a proper posture with a straight back and regulating one's breath. It can be done anytime, anywhere. When I go to the hospital every week, I often have to wait for 30 minutes to an hour for my turn. On such occasions, I take the opportunity to practice Seiza. When I say that I've given up worshipping at Buddhist altars and Shinto shrines and only practice Seiza, some claim I have abandoned religion. Indeed, I might have strayed from established religions, but to me, the method of Seiza is not just for the sake of my health. It's the source of my proactive, creative vitality, both mentally and physically. I believe it is a religion to me, unquote. So it's really important to, and fascinatingly, in the same essay, it's called Every Day is a Good Day. That's the English title, so you'll be able to find the Japanese. He says this interesting thing. He says, though my vision has deteriorated and I use a magnifying glass, reading remains my primary daily task. It's one of his disciplines, one of his practices. But it's not scholarly reading, but that of a spiritual seeker. I've journeyed through various paths, but have come to think that after all, perhaps free religion is Zen. So he says that. And recently I've become more familiar with various Zen writings. Having no experience with Zen meditation and lacking a foundation in classical Chinese, I'm captivated by these Zen writings, even if I can't fully understand them. Just as the revered Shinran Shonin advocated the path of tariki, other power, and easy practice or simple practice, I wonder if there isn't a leader who can modernize Zen for the general public. I've come to think that perhaps Okada Torajiro Sensei, who taught the Okada-style Seiza method, might be that person. So he sees Okada Sensei as bringing a form of Zen sitting into the public space. I'll come back to that later. I'll come back to this later, but it's worth knowing that in his study was displayed a piece of calligraphy written by Okada Sensei, which said, "My practice of Seiza is not religious. It is all of life." So very important to him. So how was Seiza practiced in Kietsu Kyokai? Well, it seems, and I'm grateful to George for this, it seems that Imaoka Sensei sat each Sunday morning before the main meeting began, and that this small gathering was attended not only by people from other religious communities, it was not only attended by those from Kietsu Kyokai, but also those from other religious communities. And on the occasion George attended, he tells me there were present a Zen master and a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist priest whom he recognized. Neither of them stayed for the Kietsu Kyokai service, which started about an hour later. But George felt that Imaoka Sensei might have settled on this timing in order to help those who had other commitments or duties on a Sunday morning. They needed to go to their own religious services. And that this may have been part of his general ecumenical or interfaith strategy of bringing in a wider community. And for what it's worth, I think this explanation and interpretation that George suggests strikes me as being highly likely, but that's... Given this, there seems to be no significant period of Seiza meditation in the Kietsu Kyokai service later on. However, in 1979, he does admit that he thinks that perhaps the Sunday morning talk needs to be finished with a period of meditation or perhaps music before the question and answer. So he is thinking about bringing meditation into the Sunday service as part of that practice. Did it happen? I don't know. We don't know. But in all cases, Seiza meditation was the central practice in his form of free religion. Because it's non-sectarian, it doesn't require special clothing, it doesn't require special sets of beliefs or so on and so forth. It really is just sitting. And I think that's a because it's so minimalistic, hyper minimalistic. I think it really suits the practice as it suits free religion as a central practice. So the second explicit practice Imaoka Sensei introduced into Kietsu Kyokai was the recitation of the principles of living by the community itself. It was there, I think, to help people get deep into their bodies and memories, the basic outline of what free religion was. Now, remember, it's important to hold on to the idea that the principles were not a creed. But Imaoka Sensei said, excuse me, still got a bit of a cough like George. Since Imaoka Sensei recognized the Kietsu Kyokai was an organized entity, albeit loosely, he was absolutely convinced that it was necessary to have some kind of charter or statement of shared purpose and practical guiding principles that clarified the spiritual basis of the community. Now, we've already looked at these in some detail earlier on in the course. So all I'm going to do here now is put up on the screen the version of the principles that were being used at least in 1973, and then the one that seems to be used by 1981. I'm not going to expand on them here. We can talk more about them later if we want to. But remember, they're absolutely central to creating an actual free religious community. So let's quickly rehearse those, and then we can move on. Share and essays. Here we go. So here are the ones from 1973. 8 of them. Interestingly, maybe I can show it later. But when I listen to the footage, the sound in the film George made, they're using this one, but they only read out a few of these on that Sunday morning. So I don't know why they didn't read them all. Maybe that was because the cameras were there. 1, I place trust or have faith in myself. I become aware of my own subjectivity and creativity and feel the worth of living in life or meaning in life, ikigai. Subjectivity and creativity can also be expressed as personality, divinity, and Buddha nature. 2, I place trust, have faith in my neighbor. A neighbor is oneself as a neighbor. If I place trust and have faith in myself, I inevitably place trust and have faith in my neighbor. 3, I place trust and have faith in a cooperative society. Both oneself and a neighbor, while each possessing a unique personality, are not things that exist in isolation. Because of this uniqueness, a true interdependence, a true solidarity, and true human love are established. And therein a cooperative society is realized. I place trust, have faith in the trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society. The self, neighbor, and cooperative society, while each having a unique personality, are entirely one. There's no differentiation of precedence or of superiority or inferiority between them. And one always contains the other. I also realize I ought to tell you the congregation only read the bits in bold. They didn't read the explanations that Imaoka Sensei adds. 5, I place trust, have faith in the unity of life and nature. Life, which consists of the trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society, further unites and merges with all existence, heaven, earth, and all things. 6, I place trust, have faith in the church. Kyokai, remember. Now, there's that Kyokai that we recognize, but I think in Imaoka Sensei's handwriting, and remember how I started, it's not this Kyokai, it's the Kyokai we looked at earlier with this sense of being bigger than simply a Christian church, but nevertheless, I have faith in the church. The church, Kyokai, is the prototype, archetype, and motivating power of the cooperative society. I can only be myself by being a member of the Kyokai. I place trust, have faith in a specific religion, in other words, member of the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai. However, a specific religion, including the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, neither monopolizes religious truth nor is the ultimate embodiment of it. And lastly, 8, I place trust and have faith in free religion, Ji-yu Shukyo. Ji-yu Shukyo. While having faith in a specific religion, the endless pursuit and improvement towards universal and ultimate truth is the core of religious life. Such a dynamic religion is called free religion, Ji-yu Shukyo. And those of you who've been kindly coming to my talks, I want to translate into English free religion, Ji-yu Shukyo, a bit more as a creative, inquiring, free and liberative spirituality or religion. Free religion is not, it doesn't really give a sense of that wonderful Japanese term, Ji-yu. It's a really powerful term. Okay. And then very quickly, principles of living at the end. Notice he changes it to this. I'll only read the headlines. Again, I'd love some help with the Japanese here. This is apparently a really archaic form of way of saying things. It's quite complicated for me, but for the moment, he talks about affirming himself, the individual, but then affirming and of course trusting. There's that extra character in there at the end. There's the verb that's there at the end. So you've got this extra character in I affirm or trust others. I affirm the cooperative society. I affirm the trinity of self, others, and cooperative society. I affirm, but it's also attain. There's that character at the end there again. It's like I've attained, I've reached, at least I think, please correct me later on if I'm wrong. So I've affirmed or I've attained this universal cooperative society, and I affirm the Kyokai. So again, these two principles are in the book. They're in the book if you want to have a look at them and check my translations. So those are really important. They rehearse those. That's a way of getting it into the Kitsu Kyokai community, the basic principles of free religion that they're practicing. So it is a practice. The next ones come quite quickly. The third explicit practice is the weekly question and answer, because critical, free, inquiring thinking in a community which emphasizes communal lifelong learning and moral cultivation, Kyokai, is central to Imaoka Sensei's understanding of free religion. And remember, Kyokai is more than just a church or temple. It's also this school or institute for the study of free religion. At the end of his life, Imaoka Sensei was only giving the talk once a month. But remember, Kietsu Kyokai was committed to something called laypersonism. I'll put the Japanese in the chat so you can have a quick look at it. Make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. My apologies always for my terrible Japanese pronunciation. Forgive me. There's the Japanese in the chat. Hira Kyoto Shugi, I think. Laypersonism, flat levelism. It's everybody is involved. I hope I've got that right. Well, the pronunciation. Can everybody see that?
Yeah. 平京都主義
Yeah.
Heikyoto actually, this is my first time to see this terminology, but ordinary persons, kind of,
Yeah, I think
spirit,
if I've got it right, the first character means flat.
flat. That's implies to me. It seems to me this implies a lay person,
Yeah,
lay.
that's right.
Yeah. Everybody standing in the same horizon, same level.
Perfect. And
Mm.
because Kietsu Kyokai is a free religious tradition, it's committed to that. So although Imaoka Sensei gave the talk once a month, other people gave the talk the rest of the time because worship and preaching was entrusted to other members of the congregation. And so there were a variety of voices heard. He does admit, and I think we've all experienced this, that this sometimes meant that not every week there would be heard, this is him, quote, a great preacher's eloquent sermon, unquote, because not everybody's wonderful at public speaking. But he goes on to say that because its members and he so highly valued mutual encouragement and cooperation, it was really important that other people spoke. So the weekly talk is an important practice of Kietsu Kyokai. But it's also important to remember that it's not simply an academic, philosophical, or religious statement of some final truth, but instead, at best, it was always the beginning, or really a continuance, of an ongoing conversation within the community. So it wasn't simply, this is the truth, now go away and think about it. It was something more like, this is what I'm thinking about this week. I'm thinking about Emerson, and this is an interesting idea that we can talk about in a free religious community. So it was a talk to encourage a conversation. And there would be a question and answer session which followed. As you heard, Imaoka Sensei felt later on that there should be a period of silent meditation or music between the talk and the conversation to help people think. He seems to have had a lovely habit of finishing many of his talks by saying, thank you, and now criticize me. It was always an invitation to say, I've said what I've said, now let's talk about it. And I try and live in that spirit. So I say to you once again, when I've finished, thank you, now criticize.
Oh.
But it's all about what we're seeing here is again the spiritual practice that is the collaborative work of the mutual refinement of character. Yeah, that we're trying to make ourselves better people through conversation. I've just remembered Renyo's letters. Some of you know Renyo's writing. He was one of the important Jodo Shinshu teachers. In his letters, they're fascinating. There's 4 or 5 of them that keep encouraging the community to talk together, come together, talk more, talk more. That was the way to learn. I've just remembered that. But here we are in the University of Life from which there is no graduation. That's one of Imaoka Sensei's famous and favorite phrases.
Mm.
And to finish this little section, he often quoted this passage from Lessing. I think this is a really good illustration of the spirit in which he hoped people would give the talks. and in which he gave a talk. Lessing is an 18th century, an important 18th century German philosopher, Enlightenment philosopher. Excuse me. It says, quote, "If God were to appear now, holding all truths in his right hand, all truth in his right hand, and the passionate quest for truth in his left, and asked me which I would choose, I would humbly cling to God's left hand and answer by asking, 'Give me the seeking spirit.'" So I think a talk in Kietsu Kyokai was about the seeking spirit, not truth. That's okay. And the last explicit practice I want to point to today, and I haven't run this by George before, so I'd be interested to see whether George smiles, grimaces or not. But the more I read Imaoka Sensei, I want to include, I think a very important practice in the Kietsu Kyokai was the traditional Buddhist festival of Higan. Or, yeah, have I pronounced it correctly again? Great. The biannual week-long Japanese Buddhist holiday observed around the spring and autumn equinoxes. The word Higan refers, of course, to the other shore, and as nearly all of you will know, the cycle of death and birth, samsara, is this shore, and so crossing to the other shore is used to refer to the attainment of nirvana, particularly so the other shore. So it's particularly a time for honouring ancestors and reflecting on life. And during Higan, many people will visit their ancestors' graves and offer prayers and flowers. Now, Higan was obviously really important to Imaoka Sensei, and we have two surviving talks given at Higan services. And not surprisingly, he remembers his own family sometimes. He would remember his wife and his parents particularly, but he also remembers his free religious ancestors, Anasaki Masaharu, Okada Sensei, J.W.T. Mason, and so on and so on, Tenko-san, Tenko Nishida. So he'd remember those free religious ancestors. But as with Imaoka Sensei, expands universally, whoosh, to make connections between ourselves and the natural world and the whole human species. So I'm going to read, yeah, it's good, I'm on time, two short quotes from his Higan sermon at Kietsu Kyokai in 1972. Quote, "I believe there is a profound significance in holding the religious event Higan in conjunction with the natural phenomena of the vernal and autumn equinoxes. The changing of the seasons is truly delightful, but humanity has lived in harmony with the rotation of the sun and moon since the beginning. Therefore, astronomy and the calendar are among the oldest aspects of human culture, and in that sense, it can be said that humanity has been cosmic, universal from the start. It is said that we have become cosmic beings in the age of artificial satellites, but in reality, humanity has always lived with a deep connection to the entire universe, and still does. Particularly in Japan, the changes of the four seasons are vivid, and the Japanese people have lived in harmony with nature," unquote. And, quote, "Even when it comes to remembering our more immediate ancestors, our family ancestors, as we go further back, there are people we do not know directly. And since they expand exponentially, back generation, our ancestors, remembering our ancestors, extends to all of humanity. Therefore, Higan should also be considered from a universal human perspective, and it should be the opportunity to reflect on the efforts of people around the world from ancient times. Studying the history of East and West, when considered in the spirit of Higan, allows the wisdom of the world's great thinkers and sages to live within our hearts and minds too, enabling us to connect with them. The Pure Land can be thought of as the world of Higan that is born within our hearts and minds this way. So Higan becomes a really important way of understanding how free religion is also going back through generations. Now, I'm only mentioning Higan here, of course, but he also gave sermons connected with the birth of Jesus, Christmas, the death of Shakyamuni Buddha, Nirvana Day, Labor Thanksgiving Day, which is celebrated at the same time as the Shinto Harvest Festival, Niiname Sai. Again, I have a terrible translation again. Maybe someone can correct that for me. But and New Year's Day, and I'm sure other festivals were celebrated. But I think Higan is a really important service for free religious practice in Kyetsu Kyokai. And now, very quickly to finish, music. He did add music in the end. It wasn't there at the beginning. And in one of his later essays, he suggests singing a well-known Jodo Shinshu Honganji Ha hymn called Nori no Miyama. It's about the four seasons. I don't know how well known it is. That he thought this would be an appropriate choice. And fascinatingly, in George's film, when I watched it and listened to the soundtrack, they sing. This is in the 80s, and that's what they're singing. They're singing this beautiful hymn about the four seasons. So Imaoka Sensei obviously did introduce music. And I think music should be considered part of the practice, at least at the end of free religious practice. So those are four so far, but there are also some implicit practices, which I will do very quickly. Calligraphy. Shodo, the way of writing, as we know, is very important, again, in Japanese culture. It's an expression of a person's character, spirit, and aesthetic sensibility. We're lucky that we have one of Imaoka Sensei's calligraphies. So I'll share that with you. And I have a question that I need to ask all of you to help me. Here's the calligraphy. You can see that here it's in the University of Life, there is no graduation. It's handwritten. That was his famous saying. Here's his name, Shinichiro, Imaoka Shinichiro. But can you help me, people, with this one? It looks to me like it's Yuitsu Kyo, but an old, I've got there. Can anyone read that?
Wondered 5 years old, senior person, Okina, the senior gentleman, who is 105 years old. 105, something like 100 means 100, go means 5, and O is a kind of senior person.
Senior person, thank you. I got the 5. And I just couldn't read it. I just couldn't read it. It's terrible. Thank you. So there you go. Let's go back to, there you go to it. And this was given to George. So we have some of Imaoka Sensei's calligraphy, but we also know that he had the calligraphy of some of his teachers hanging in his study. And he's quite clear that he made it one of his practices, daily practices, to stop and read the sayings. I can tell you what they are later on if you want to know. But that will be a practice of reflecting on some 5 important teachings of his teachers. But I want to bring it into Kyetsu Kyokai. Here we are. There's Imaoka Sensei in Kyetsu Kyokai in George's film. You can see here's an old... There's the old character for Kyetsu, an older character. It's going right to left, Kyetsu. So now, here it is. It's blurred because the camera's moving. This is on a huge piece of wood. It's been done beautifully, Kyetsu. And then there's a text here, which I simply can't read. It never becomes readable. But that sat in Kietsu Kyokai's meetings all the time. Yeah. And because the idea of Kietsu was so important, I can't stress how important it was. This idea, this constant process of returning to one, always returning to one, um, is it's there, it's big. I think that's a spiritual practice. I think it's there to let people meditate upon that name, Kietsu. Because in Imaoka Sensei's free religion, there's no such thing as a final static unity behind the scenes or towards which we should be aiming. It's always for Imaoka Sensei this dynamic, living, creative connection. That there's no, it's the Buddhist affirmation of dependent origination, of course, which Maruta-san has so helpfully been talking with us about in the Buddhist context of free religion. So I think that calligraphy is a religious practice. I think it's part of the spiritual practice. Flowers, just note the flowers. If you go back to here, there you are. You can see flowers beautifully put on the table with him talking. Here's the congregation. They're singing at this point. Flowers, and flowers are here again. The beauty of the natural world, I think, should be considered as part of a free religious spiritual practice. It's there in a very light way in Kietsu Kyokai. But Imaoka Sensei also loved sakura. There's the cherry blossom season. So going out into the world and contemplating nature, I think, is also a free religious practice that's practiced lightly within Kietsu Kyokai and certainly by Imaoka Sensei. And then finally, because he always walked in sakura season, walking. My last point, and I will finish with this, is that one practice that isn't explicitly done in Kietsu Kyokai, but was done for his students in 1934 in Seisoku Academy. He picked up on the Canon pilgrimage. I don't know. There's a pilgrimage of 33 sites to the south of Tokyo, going down the island. Canon, of course, is the Bodhisattva of compassion. And he takes this as the basic model and decides that he's going to encourage his students to do a secular religious pilgrimage around Tokyo based on the 33 sites of Canon. And he visits government buildings, Shinto shrines, Buddhist shrines, the airport, the crematorium, the newspapers, the sanitation department, all these places. He encouraged his students to take a little stamp book, you know, the books you get when you visit temples. And the students had to stamp the book and get the signature from the people who worked there. And it was his attempt, I think, at having a walking pilgrimages for his students to help them see the interconnection of all things. We rely upon people who clean the drains, who work in the government offices, who work, you know, everything is interconnected. And so he saw pilgrimage as a way of encouraging people to work for the common good. And remember the date, 1934. It is my conjecture, though I have no proof, that this pilgrimage was one way he could push against the really dark times of the 1930s, you know, the whole rise of a particular form of emperor fascism, which were making it very difficult for liberal religion. Well, he could push against that by getting his students to have this pilgrimage, which went to national sites and Shinto shrines, but he could also show people the interconnectedness, that the world was bigger and more inclusive. So I think it was also his way of pushing and supporting liberal, progressive values in a very dark time as a teacher. And for those who are interested, I can share it with you at some point. I'll just go back to the. I've just had a piece published in a journal about this pilgrimage. Yeah, I gave it at a conference, but it's about how this Imaoka's secular pilgrimage can actually be adopted in the modern world, perhaps to encourage people to see the interconnectedness of all things. But that, whether or not you want to read that, that was a practice, a practice of Imaoka. So thank you. That's where
Yeah.
I'll, and it's over to you, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, questions, thoughts.
Ah, ah. Seems to me, Joyce-san, you want to say something, but just I'd like to express my wholehearted joy, appreciation, happiness, listening to such a comprehensive everything about Imaoka Sensei. Yeah, wow, such a expert on Imaoka Sensei. I'm so fortunate. This evening, I was attending another meeting and I communicated Marda-san. And my meeting was supposed to end at 4 o'clock. So I mentioned Marta-san, oh, I'm so unfortunate. I cannot be at your presentation session at the beginning, part. I miss. But fortunately, my meeting ended earlier. So
Right.
I feel Imako Sensei is helping me. Thank you.
Well, actually, to get the conversation. Oh yeah, George, you go first. I've got.
I I want to say the same thing. It was wonderful to hear you, Andrew, and how comprehensive you presented that wonderful material. Uh, I'd like to add two more celebrations that suggest something that it seems to be incorporated from Shinto. The one of the things that is missing from uh, other forms or paths of religion is celebration. And as you mentioned, the New Year's, I went with Imaoka's son to several New Year's at Meiji Grand Shrine. We went very, very early, and there was already 1 million people on the grounds. And these are communal activities. Uh, Imaoka Sensei laughed when he said his wife had finally done something really good for him. She provided some money for him to have some celebrations. And a couple of the celebrations that I'd like to mention, one was um, Mason's uh, uh, anniversary that he celebrated. I don't remember whether it was a birthday or death day. And then on the 75th anniversary of Vivekananda, he celebrated a national holiday for Vivekananda. Um, Invited 30 or 40 people to the International House, and with his wife's money, he treated everyone to this celebration. Uh, uh, he, she had driven him almost to suicide. when she had a debt of millions of yen in the 30s, and he had no way of paying for that. But eventually, on her third attempt, after failing twice and indebting them twice with her business failures, she finally began to succeed. And he would laugh and say, uh, she even made it possible for him to travel to IARF meetings. And so she had done him a great favor with her business. So, uh, but I said all of that to say that it was part of his religious practice to celebrate. And that's what Shinto taught him, that celebration of the community, of bringing people together to celebrate people's birthdays, to celebrate remembrances, to celebrate uh, even the city worker was something that was grand that he had learned in interfaith uh, dialogue and learning. So again, thank you so much for taking
Oh,
a ecclesiastical look at Imaoka's life. That is, looking at how a community was made for free religionists. Uh, as a scholar, I didn't do a very good job on that. So, what a contribution you have made. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. But of course, George, don't do yourself down. I couldn't have done any of this if you hadn't done your work. It's this is dependent origination. We're all dependent on each other's work. Yeah. Any other initial thoughts? I've got a couple of questions to throw in, so don't worry if there's nothing I can. But any other comments, first of all?
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your I found so many inspirational words in such a short presentation. Now, from your presentation, I felt like that the kiitsu, it means freeness. It's one is returning to one is free religion, freeness. Now, freeness means in Buddhism, nirvana. And I think Zen Buddhists say the finger points at the moon. Now, if we think about the moon, we again conceptualize another word,
Yeah.
another concept. So, to me, that finger points at not the moon, but the, say, interconnectedness, as you say. One, the one of kiitsu, returning to one. And what is the one? To me, sunyata, emptiness.
Yeah.
So that is what my impression, what I realized from your talk. And the other one is free religion is very desperately important to me. Why? Because it liberates myself from suffering. Liberation, freeness is the extinction of suffering of myself. Liberation from my death, from my old age, from my all kinds of suffering, even superficial joy, enjoyment, joys, the rapture, superficial. So, Imaoka Sensei's word, one, returning to one, is not something we construct, not something we build, but we rather discover. It's already oneness here and now, everywhere.
Yeah.
So, Kiitsu is not just, as you said, not religion. It's a life. It's life experience. And wherever we go, we can find it. That's my assumption. I don't realize it to the full extent, but just a small glimpse to the meaning of oneness, the one returning to one. So I think that what Imaoka Sensei saw Buddhist, so beyond religion, beyond non-religion, everything, as you said. Thank you. That's my
Well, thank you, Meritus. And that's I think when you mentioned Sunyata, I think that's partly also why it might be that Seiza meditation is so important for him, because it's a way of experiencing some of that there. That's part of it. And the other thing that really struck me about your reply there was the liberation from suffering. I think that's really important. And I'm going to ask this. This might get a bit technical in terms of Japanese language, but this is my only chance to do it when you're here. But I think there's something in his later principles of living which speak about that. But liberation from suffering, he's very clear in all his writings that within Kiitsu Kyokai and free religion, that salvation, the liberation from suffering, can only be done in a community. It's not something you can attain yourself. It's being part of this one. So it's without being part of the community saves, we save the community. The community save, we save the community. And I don't know if you're all aware of, do you know the story of the prodigal son in Christian teaching? If one of you doesn't, those of you who don't know the story, please hold your hand up. And if one of you doesn't know it, then I'll tell the story. Because you need to. Does everybody know it?
法と息子の例えっていう。
please tell us again.
Okay.
Prodigal son? Yeah.
Right. I can do it quite quickly, but it illustrates it perfectly. So within the Christian tradition, there is a story about the prodigal son. It's as follows. A son is very unhappy with his father and his brother. He's saying, "Oh, come on, I want my money now. I want my inheritance now." So he asks his father, can he have his money inheritance now, before his father dies. He takes the money and then goes off and he disappears off to another land and has a big party. He drinks, he has a great time. He eventually runs out of money and has to come back home. It's terrible. So he comes back home, and as he's walking so this is a story apparently told by Jesus. As this returning son comes close to home, the father sees him and says, "Oh, my son," rushes out, brings him back into the family. They kill a calf, a cow, for a celebration meal. His brother, who's out in the fields, isn't happy. That's part of the story, because his brother's come back. His brother's had this crazy life, and yet he's welcomed back with a big party. So there's tension there. But the point is, he comes back and he's welcomed back into the family. Now, in Christian theology, the father is seen as the person who saves. The father is seen as God, the Christian God, the merciful Christian God. Imaoka Sensei says, no, it's not the father who saves. It's the home. It's the returning to oneness. It's the home that saves the father who's missing the son, and it's the returning home that saves the son. And so Imaoka Sensei has this idea of reading this Christian story as an illustration of how returning to one, returning to our universal home together is what saves, which is, I think, a very beautiful reading of that story. Yeah. But if please put your hand up if you've got a question. May I ask you a bit of a technical Japanese question? Because I think it relates to what you talked. I'm always getting so Suzuki-san. Yes, am I saying it right? Yes, have I got it right? I never know. How do I address people properly in this meeting? Anyway, so I'll get to the story. So let me share the text. Oh, chat. Someone's just put something in the chat. Oh, I saw. Sorry, I didn't see that. Our visitor from India has got some network issues, so that's why he's left. That's a pity. Okay, I'm going to share this and ask you a question, which relates to your point. In this revised, can you all see that? Yeah, you all got that in front of you. Right. Now, in this revised one, here it's got the same form, yes. I know I'm translating. This I know is an archaic form, an old form. So I hope I've done the best I can as translating that as I affirm there's myself. Of course, those of you who have Japanese will know that I, and then this is having the sense of affirm myself. And notice that they've all got this same form. Starts like that, finishes like that, except number 2, I affirm or trust others, because this gets put in, this character, right? And look here, there's the other one, which is really confusing. This one here, having a sense of attaining and reaching, having. Now, affirming in English means I affirm it, yeah? I affirm. And I understand, whoops, oh, sorry, let's go back on the wrong one. Hang on. Principles of Living revised. It's this one I want to. So trusting is our trusting, but this one here, this is what's interesting me. Number 5. It's got that same form, I, and then at the end there's the characters there, but it's got this extra character in meaning affirm, and there's the cooperative, universal cooperative society. But it has the sense here of I attain, I have already, I've reached, I have it. And this is the one time I see Imaoka Sensei saying something like, it doesn't matter what we believe or what we don't believe, we need to affirm others, myself, cooperative society. But the one thing I know I have, that we all have, is the universal cosmic cooperative society. That we have. That's the oneness. That's the returning to one that's always there. That's what we believe or think. And does that, from your knowledge of that way of using this old form of I affirm, does that seem right? Have I got that right? It's really difficult.
Yeah. Yes, I affirm attend the universal cosmic cooperative society. 私は宇宙的共同体を得ずる。This final Chinese character, this is to obtain,
Yeah, this one here.
to get, to obtain. Yeah. So, 私は宇宙的共同体を信ずる。Rather, my sense telling me the Chinese letter to believe or to have a faith or to affirm,
Yeah,
Shin,
this one. Yeah,
should be maybe a bit appropriate, but there must be some deep implication, symbolic meaning for translator choosing this Chinese letter.
you
But I
see,
think this really gives us a power, the trinity of self, others, myself and others, many others, and as an inclusive space, cooperative society, this is, thanks to this virtue of cooperative society, I, myself, and many others can be united, can attain to kind of a oneness. I think this statement is very, very powerful. This reminds me our Buddhist slogan, three treasures, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and
yes,
but anyway, any way of making parallel is possible. But Imaoka Sensei's statement here, trinity of self, others, and inclusive cooperative society, which can be expanded to cosmos itself. Here with heaven and earth and all things to form a universal cosmic cooperative society.
yeah.
It's really wonderful and fortunate all of us to be able to read today, this afternoon, this statement.
Because it seems to me that number 3.
Oh, yeah. Here I happen to have a
Hang on, sorry, I'll stop
statement,
there.
Imaoka Sensei's statement of my principle for my life. This is all in Japanese. And here, let me see. Maybe this might give you. Yeah, this is the 私の生活信条. This is just a preliminary or temporary statement.
Yes,
And
that's right.
here number 5 gives, 私は宇宙的共同社会を信ずる. I have a deep faith, or I affirm the cosmic community here. So I think this is a kind of 私は宇宙的共同体を信ずる. So instead of talk or obtain, but here 信ずる, shin is a faith, to have a faith or to affirm or to believe. So
This is,
yeah.
may I share this then? Hang on, because it's quite hard. Because I think this is what you're showing us is the earlier, a version of the earlier one. Let's find it. Share. Right.
I see.
You see, he
Yeah, all
changed
these
it.
are 信ずる. I see.
You see, this is what's fascinating. This is why I'm asking you, is the one we've just been looking at was what he said closer to the end of his life for himself. And there it is. There's that. There it is. Yeah, at the end, every single one finishes the same. Same way.
Later.
But when he gets to that last one, it changes to this very unusual form.
Wow, I think this is quite problematic to me. 私は共同社会をずる. Seems to me some appropriate Chinese letter is missing. Number 3, I affirm the cooperative society. 私は共同社会をずる。共同社会を信ずる or seems to me some letter is missing. By mistake or or intentionally, this is made so to create some deep symbolic implication or significance. I'm not quite sure.
No, no. Well, it's at the very end of the book. It's almost towards. It's on the last few pages of the book you have of Imaoka's sensei's book. So if when you have a moment, if you can have a look at it and have a think, I'd really appreciate it. So, this is a less technical Japanese question, but I think it relates to something we're all trying to do in all our languages, which is trying to find words which speak about free religion in a way people understand. And one of the things that I believe, but I do not know, is that because Imaoka Sensei started to use some interesting, he used older kanji because he was born in 1881. He knew the subtle meanings of the words. So when he puts, let's go back to the picture. There we are. When he put this interesting version of Kiitsu at the end, so there's Kiitsu Kyo Kai, would a modern Japanese person know what that Kyokai means? That's or was that just something that someone walking by on the street would have looked at and said, "What's that?" So I wonder if Imaoka Sensei, like all of us, was trying to find terms which spoke of the subtlety. But actually, in that example, it was too complicated. It was too old and too complicated to be understood fully. I mean, I do that all the time. I use a complicated word where I need to use a simple one. Because he does use a lot of old characters, doesn't he? A lot of older characters in his book.
And definitely, I receive a kind of impression by reading Kyokai, as is written by Imaoka Sensei. Kyo and Kai. Kai is the more strokes. That's traditional or older way of a stroke. Kai of Kyokai. But Inokuma-san and Maruta-san, every one of us, Japanese, I think that old style of Kai of Kyokai is not totally out of our, capacity to identify meaning or, Kai is definitely a traditional style of writing, but and Imaoka Sensei adopted this letter for Kyokai. I definitely respect deep teaching guidance by Imaoka Sensei, a community of learning to cultivate our spirituality or to help the spirit of liberation or returning to oneness. I think, I'm very much grateful.
Can I say something?
Maruta,
I think even Rishoko Sekai in the times of early history, early stage of Rishoko Sekai, Kai is the same. But at that time, Kai was old-fashioned letter, kanji.
Yeah.
And at some point of Rishoko Sekai history, it changed new style of kai.
Yeah.
So the old style of kanji is already young generation doesn't understand, even cannot read. So now I'm sorry to say, but there's no meaning to use that word, to
Yeah.
use that old-fashioned kai
Yeah.
in this contemporary age.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah, Yuji, were you going to say something?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this wonderful discussion. I have been reading the George's book,
Ah, yeah.
and it was very intense book, and I need this dictionary all the time to understand the difficult terminology. But talking about this Kiitsu Kyokai in two different characters, I can see that Imaoka sensei had been struggling uh, with institutionalizing or keeping it is as association much free, you know.
Yeah.
So Kiitsu Kyokai, which was named after 1948,
Yeah.
and the Kiitsu Kyokai, which it means association, that was the named 1913 or something. It's
Yeah,
much earlier.
that's right. I'll just share
Is
it.
it right?
Yeah, yeah. I'll
Yeah.
just share the pic. Keep talking, and I'll show people can. So yeah, the top one and
Yeah,
Morgana's.
top one is more free, like association.
That's right.
And the second one is like a church,
Yeah,
you know, the more like a doctrinated, institutionalized. And the third one is the please point to the last character.
this
That
one here. This
yeah,
one.
that one is just all the typeface of the kind. Yeah, that's exactly yes. Yes. So this is what I think after reading this, because Imaoka sensei encounters with Buddhism and Christianity and then Unitarianism, and he had went through this some political things in Boston and missionaries, all these things, and in the very turbulent time of the Japanese history in the Taisho period, militarizing. And so I think that he was trying to find out the best name for the Kiitsu Kyokai. I think this is the implication of the how he struggled with naming and finding the Kiitsu Kyokai itself. It's a nature of the Kiitsu Kyokai. And one more thing is that I would like to say that Andrew, I really appreciate you so much for, and George also said, celebration of life is universal in every religion. Like we have the friends from the India and other countries. I think it's celebration. If celebration of life in community or in commune is what the free religions looking for or means, and then it is so easy for me to understand and learn the free religion. I don't have to study all other religions.
No.
Because as you said, Andrew, thank you so much for replying to me. So I thought I was so frustrated because I felt to understand free religion, I have to study all other religions. You know, that is so difficult. So I want to say thank you, Andrew, and thank you, George. But I have to complain, George, once again that you wrote this difficult book. It's so hard to read. But this is, I recommend, I think every one of you read this book, the Cosmic Sage.
Cosmic Sage.
Cosmic Sage is a beautiful book. And please read Vince and I'm sorry, my pronunciation is wrong. Morgana,
Yeah.
excuse me, please read this book.
Morgana-san.
Morgana-san, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think I mean, obviously we've just written to each other about just that, Yuji. But I think I've often had, because I'm interested in different religious traditions, always have been, and then I explore them, and it's very easy to think that when you know all about different religions, or superficially, that somehow you've got closer to why they are what they are. But sometimes too much study of different religious traditions we have an English phrase which is, you cannot see the wood, that's a big forest, you cannot see the forest for the trees because you're keeping looking at these little, and so you can't see the picture. And free religion, it seems, when Imaoka Sensei is encouraging religious traditions and individuals to reconnect with the sources of religion, that's really what he's talking about, that an encouragement for us to look in our own traditions and places for the source of the religious spark, the religious experience that is ours, that awakens us, and then that's what free religion is helping us to try and experience again. So there's a few years ago, I was reading one of the Kyoto School philosophers, in English translation, of course, Nishitani Keiji. And although he was a Zen Buddhist himself, he gave a series of talks to some Jodo Shinshu temples. And in that first essay, that he gives to them, the first talk, he's really concerned about why young people aren't coming to religious practices. I mean, he was talking about Buddhism, but it will be the same Shinto, Christian, but it's the same in Western Europe. People aren't coming. And he said it's because often the rituals, the practices we do have become disconnected from the source that made them come into being. And so he's saying what we need to recover is the spirit that made this practice. And that's what Imaoka Sensei was clearly concerned about, is trying to encourage all of us to look at our practices and see if it connects with the spirit that gave them birth. And that's quite hard to do because we so often just do things. Practices are wonderful, but there's a famous story told in educational circles in England. Imagine this story. A group of people decide they're going to get on a ship and go across the sea to discover a new land. They're all very excited when they start. Yes, we're going to find this new land. And they get on the ship and they go. And they're sailing, so they have to pull up sails, clean the decks, coil ropes, polish the brass. But it's wonderful. They do this for weeks and months and months and months, and they still haven't got to this new land. And the captain notices that the crew are now only pulling up sails, only cleaning the decks, only coiling ropes. They've forgotten the passion that got them on the boat. So the captain has to try and get the crew to recover the passion that gave the reason for pulling up the sails. And it's ikigai, isn't it? It's rediscovering ikigai, rediscovering the meaning and the passion the worth of life in our practices. And I think Imaoka Sensei was trying to get us to do that. Do chip in, Morgana, if you're, because I realise I haven't said hello properly, and I remember you from the last meeting, so lovely having you here, but I realise you've come in late, so it's a bit difficult, but don't feel
Yeah. I apologize. Actually, there was a bit of a confusion with the links, and so I missed it yesterday. But Luke sent the link today. I thought, well, I'll just try just to see if the meeting was still. Of course, I'm in the Netherlands, so yeah, I do apologize because, of course, I'm really, really interested in the subject. I was just, it was really coincidental, but what's coincidence? I've just been writing to a friend or a group of friends from Charter from Compassion, actually, and talking about what is compassion. And I was saying that one of the things that I found very useful when talking about religion, um, from either a multi-faith point of view or an interfaith point of view, is to actually realize that religion is a cultural phenomena. And what I mean by that is you have to really, who are you speaking to, which country? And of course, if you treat it as a cultural phenomena, of course, then it's much easier to ask somebody about the culture rather than the theology. And I've always found a wonderful way of saying, oh, tell me more about your culture of Shinto, for example. And people are much more eager and much more willing to talk about rather than saying, oh, what's your theology? So that's from my experience. And certainly you were just talking about the spirit of religion. And I come from a pagan background, so nature religions. So for me, it's always, where does it actually, how does religion actually exist? But of course, it's usually that people are recognizing those forces beyond those cosmic forces or universal forces. And that for me is also extremely important, that to recognize that everybody who practices a religion in shape or form is usually connecting with this universal force. So I think that's, for me, it's always been useful and helps to open the conversations rather than sort of saying, I'm Christian, that's to me, as soon as somebody says, opens with, I am Christian, Muslim, whatever, it almost goes boom.
Yeah.
And so a bit of advice for everybody. I've found in my experience that to ask somebody about the culture is so much easier, so much easier. And then you can sort of say, and if they say, well, what's your culture? Then, of course, you have a dialogue. And for me, that's always, certainly from the interfaith point of view, the dialogue is so important today.
Yeah, thank you. That's a powerful and important point. Thank you for making. And it goes back to an earlier part of our conversation, which of course you weren't able to catch, but hopefully it'll connect immediately with you now. One of the important influences on Imaoka Sensei's own life was a man called J.W.T. Mason, who was an American journalist who became passionate about Shinto. And George and I, we're slightly different. We have slightly different feelings about Mason between us, but we can tease that out. But I'm quite interested in Mason because Mason brought an understanding of a man called Henri Bergson, the French philosopher. Now, this is an oversimplification, but after he began to study Shinto with Imaoka Shinichiro was his translator and guide in the 1930s, who also knew Bergson. So there's this connection between them. It was Bergson, Mason, who was an American and a lover of Bergson, who, with Imaoka Sensei present, when he was doing the kind of cultural thing you're talking about of visiting the Shinto shrines, had another viewpoint that suddenly allowed out this kind of possibly the universal thing that inspired Shinto practice. And I'll just share with you this wonderful passage because you can see how looking at the surface, and the surface is always important. Everything is surface. Think about it. When you go deeper into a subject, you're still looking at another surface. Everything is the surface. This is a funny thing. Even the deepest something is still a surface. But when you go down, you can find new languages in order to cross the cultural differences. Now, here's this wonderful moment in one of his essays where you can see this. This is an essay called, let's just get the title, What Kind of Church is Kietsu Kyokai? So this is 1959. And it's in the book some of you have. Now, this is this passage here, I love it. I often hear critical remarks that Kietsu Kyokai lacks creeds, scriptures, pastors, and priests, making it too vague and difficult to grasp. Let's highlight the whole passage for you. And indeed, such a criticism is perfectly reasonable. However, since the quintessence means the heart, if you like, the quintessence of religion lies in grasping, that is understanding, the meaning of the great life of free and selfless creative evolution. Such matters are simply peripheral details. That being said, just because they are peripheral doesn't mean they're entirely unnecessary. So at some point, our church should also organize and put in order these things. Now, the reason I'm pulling this out is he saw in Shinto the great life of, there's the Japanese as well. Let's have the Japanese for you. The great life of free and selfless creative evolution, which he gets from Bergson, some of that language. He saw that in Shinto, and people within Shinto spoke that to him. He saw that in Buddhism. He saw it again in Christianity. He saw it again in Vivekananda and the Indian traditions. But you can't just talk about the great life of free and selfless creative evolution. You have to do it. And this, you have to have a practice which reveals it. And of course, in Shinto, you do this kind of practice. In Christianity, you do this kind of practice. And in the pagan earth-centered traditions, you do it this way, and so on. The practical things are really important. We have to get to this great life of free and selfless evolution through some practice. And that's why I think he so encouraged us to value our practices, our individual practices, our Buddhist practice, Shinto practice, Jewish, Christian, Muslim practice, because that's the way we get into a realization of the creative free evolution. The Kietsu, Kyokai, where we get a sense we're all, whoa, we're drawing together as one somehow. Sorry, I'm getting a bit passionate. It's coming up to 10 to. Vince, I know you're very quiet, but Vince, have you got, because we've had some fascinating conversations over the years about how free religion, you're understanding it in the Filipino connection, where there's not been a tradition of it, and how you're understanding Imaoka Sensei's teachings in your own country. Would you share? You don't have to. I don't want to put pressure on you.
No, I do want to share something. I just want to say it's amazing to experience Kitsukyokai through your group. I don't know if everyone here knows about less than 2 years ago, Andrew started an online conversation and Seiza group, which he also called Kitsukyokai after, I would imagine, after Imaoka Shinichiro's idea of the ideal community. And it's a long story how I got there, but it's amazing that I'm experiencing it right now, this more contemporary version of the Kitsukyokai, while at the same time attending to these lectures by Andrew. And I've also been reading, by the way, George Williams' book. Actually, I've read it, The Cosmic Sage. And so it's amazing comparing how Kitsukyokai was done in the past and how Andrew and our group is trying so hard, I guess, to apply what we are learning, or what meager things we are learning about how it was done before. I find it really, really amazing. Um, the difference is stark. So the Kitsukyokai right now is completely online. There's no building, but I saw from the video, from the unfinished documentary by George, uh the Imaoka's Kitsukyokai was really done in a building. There were really many people who are going there. Our online group is really small. So, the group that I have, which happens during the second and fourth Thursday of the month, we're only about four, sometimes five in that small group. So it's really an intimate experience. But I think our current experiment, trying to apply Imaoka's ideas, is responding to a very, very important gap in how spirituality and religion is practiced, not just in Japan, but in the entire world. So in my case, I've been fortunate enough to meet someone uh, who who is also based in the Philippines, a fellow Filipino, who is starting to be interested about the idea of doing religion this way. Because, in the Philippines, there is no strong liberal religious tradition. So we are really, really envious of the things we are learning from our Japanese brothers, and of course from other cultures and traditions who have strong liberal religious traditions. I say this very sincerely. There is a gap in our culture, in our country, and that gap is obviously affected by our long colonial history, our past, which is, the clash of Western and Eastern cultures in this country. And so to learn that there is a theologian, and a Japanese theologian with these kinds of understanding, and obviously Andrew and George, who has been writing a lot about Imaoka, it has really been helpful for us. I'm one of the young people you are referring to who are not uh, interested a lot with religion. So most of my contemporaries, I'm just in my 30s. Most of my contemporaries, my peers, are not really interested in religion. But what you are doing is affecting me and some of my peers. And so I think it's important. What we are doing right now is really, really important. Uh, one last thing I wanted to say is we will really benefit from Japanese people joining our Kitsukyokai discussions. I just realized right now, because Andrew is really, really trying his best to interpret the original written text, and we're really appreciative of that. But just listening to how our fellow Japanese participants in this meeting are easily able to understand the nuances of the translations, I find it really helpful in my own study of Imaoka's writings. So I hope you join us sometimes when you have the time. So thank you very much for everything that you've been doing for us.
Well, thank you, Vince. I've got a suggestion, because we're down to the last 5 minutes. By the way, I have just shared on the chat the link to these Kitsukyokai. It's the web page for the Kitsukyokai meetings. They're on a Thursday, and in order to catch two time zones, on the first Thursday of the month and the third Thursday of the month, they're in the evening in the UK, and then wherever they are in the world. And then on the second and fourth Thursdays, we do it in the morning. That's tomorrow, and that's whenever it is for you're always welcome. And I second, what Vince says. It's lovely. I'm so relieved to have people who can actually speak and are knowledgeable about Japanese. Thank you. But I have a suggestion for the last 4 minutes, with George's permission. I had ready in case we wanted to see it, but I have the last 4 minutes of a short section of the film George took of Imaoka Sensei. Just the moment when Imaoka Sensei walks into the room of Kietsu Kyokai, he's welcomed, he sits down, he sits in front of the Kietsu Kyokai board, and you'll see he's going to be talking about the Creed of Life. You'll hear them start singing this song that I mentioned. I'll let the beginning play of that because it's quite long and they're not expert singers. And then just at the end, you can hear them say the principles of living. Would you like just to see Imaoka Sensei and the actual Kietsu Kyokai? Yeah? Is that okay, George, to share that? Yeah. So what I need to do is share a video file. I've never done this before, so I will, hopefully this will work. And here we go. Selected writings of Imaoka film. And, no, I know how to do it. Okay, it's not going to let me do it that way, so let's not worry about that. I'll just do this, hopefully. So, okay, can you all see a black screen at the moment? Here we go. Here's Imaoka Sensei.
Oh.
So this is him getting ready. I'll just move it forwards. And here he is.
そういうふうに言われました。で、普通の通りで、大会は11時ですけど、私たちいつも普通の通り10分ぐらい遅れますから、今日もまた10分ぐらい遅れて、本当に普通の通り始めたいと思います。それでは、最終皆様で、それではちょっと今日初めての方の教会に行くことができることに、大変私どもに喜びとするところで、山岡先生は、去年の9月16日で105歳の誕生日を迎えられまして、今年9月で106歳になります。ますますそのお元気で。それでは皆さんで、森の宮間を斉唱したいと思います。お手元に足があると思います。それではご起立ください。
So I press pause there. That's the song that they're singing, and they'll sing it for a little bit. And then I realize it's hard to hear, but they sing all 4 verses of it. And then just at the end, you might be able to hear them do the Creed of Life. Again, for Japanese speakers, you would have seen it written on the board. It said the date, I think it was the 8th of March. My Creed of Life, or My Principles of Living, by Imaoka Shinichiro Sensei. So then just at the end, Here we come. I know where it is. This is all of them singing. Here we go. This is the creed of life moment.
日本真る私は北の方に私は道路の戦いの私は中的労働社会をし私は教会をし
And yeah, there you go. That's that. There's lots more footage, but it just gives you a little idea. It was a very small meeting, but it's rather lovely to see Imaoka coming. And Maruta, sorry, if you're talking, we can't hear you. You're muted. Oh, okay. And I think we're at the end of the meeting. Is there any last comments, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah. Yes.
I've just mentioned that it's full moon today, so wherever you are, we call this one. I'm in Western Europe, of course, but we call our moons. We give them all special names, and this moon is Rose Moon because, of course, the roses are in full bloom at the moment. But also, one of the things about our moons as well, we try to also encapsulate a sort of spiritual principle, if you like. And one of the things I remind people is, for example, the rose is a beautiful flower, but it also has the thorns. So that which is very precious to us also needs us to protect and defend, etc., etc. So what we try to do with the full moons is also to help people by using rituals. And of course, that's one of the things that I think most people would say is really the most powerful way of expression because most often we're using gestures. I was just saying about body language is also incredibly important, but often we find a great deal of success when you're connecting also with the moons. So it's just a tip. So I hope you all enjoy, from my perspective, the rose moon and help protect and defend nature and all living beings. So thank you very much for just this last part. I'm sorry, I'm sorry I'm late, but I really like to connect with all of you and keep in contact. So thanks again, Andrew, and everybody for these are wonderful meetings.
Thank you. Well, Imaoka Sensei would, I'm sure, have loved the rose and the moon. So thank you for that wisdom. Great. So yeah, any last, just quick sentences. I don't want to overrun too long, but if there's any burning thing you'd like to, this has been recorded, by the way, so it will go up so we can revisit. But any last comments? Yeah, Yuji, yeah, quick, yeah, go for it quickly. Yeah.
Yes, just one moment. I want to thank the Andrew and George for making the Imaoka Sensei alive again. To tell the truth, many Japanese people forgot about the Imaoka Sensei, but you and George, what is that? The resurrection coming. Yes. I really appreciate it. On behalf of all Japanese people, I would like to say thank you, and Andrew and George for praising the Imaoka Sensei in this wonderful way. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
it's been a real joy for me. Thank you very, very, very much. I'll get this off to Luke to edit it, but it'll go up on the website. But I'll also put it up on my. Sounds grand. I have a YouTube channel. It only has these videos on it. That's all it does. but they'll be there. And I look forward to meeting you again soon. So, arigato.
Yeah. Big congratulations
Thank
on
you.
your wonderful presentation.
Go well, my friends. Go well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.